Yeah. So I guess I'll just jump right into it. Welcome back to the Common Sense Medicine Podcast with your host, Dr. Timothy Chin. I'm your co-host, Michael Abernathy, and we're back again today talking about the psychological stuff that goes along with weight loss and, you know, like more broadly speaking, behavioral change. So last week where were we last week? We talked about the delayed gratification and stuff.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we went from adjusting your environment to delayed gratification, which I think last week's episode even reaches beyond weight loss, right? Even we know pretty much every successful person in their venture has to be able to delay gratification. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's completely opposite of delayed gratification.
Correct.
And so when it comes to weight loss, having skills and realizing that this is a skill you can practice and improve on, really, I think, was eye-opening. I really enjoyed the future self conversation. So yeah, if you haven't listened to the episode, go listen to it, because I think that was really, really helpful.
Yeah. What's crazy, while I was researching future self, and I think I talked about this a little bit at the beginning of yesterday or last week's episode, the exploration of future self was such an interesting concept, and you know, why we have difficulties connecting and how you can kind of work on that. But there are rabbit holes that I started to go down that I was like, this is way too much to like, not just information for the podcast, just philosophically, it was just way too much for me at the moment. So I'm going to have to revisit that at some point when I'm better equipped, like up here, not from like can I handle this mentally, but like the cognitive ability to understand and like, it was over my head. For lack of better words.
Well, for sure. Well, and again, I think today, the things that we're talking about, and again, delayed gratification, I think everyone understands that, but how to practice it is a harder part, you know. And today even, you know, groups, social support, this is one of the things that I think everyone understands. I mean, even biblically in the Bible, it will say like the people you're surrounded with affect who you are. But actually implementing this is another matter.
Yeah, there's a quote. I don't know who said it originally. It's probably in multiple books at this point, but it's, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that goes exactly to what you just said. It's the people around you affect who you are. Behaviorally, just your identity, how you feel about yourself, it's all affected by the people around you. And so when we are talking about social support, what we're talking about is your family, your friends, your coworkers, or kind of any other group that you spend a lot of time with. And so another part of why those groups are meaningful when it comes to our behavior is that social groups, and you could use culture as another stand-in for this, but you know, I would say that social groups is a much smaller kind of representation of culture, being a bigger representation, right? They dictate our behaviors in the sense that the group has come together and identified some kind of common ideal or common interest that they're all kind of, you know, working towards, or, you know, and they all agree upon what are the acceptable behaviors or what are the rules for behavior in this group, right? And so culturally and all the way down family, you know, friend groups, you kind of agree on how are we all going to interact with each other and participate in different activities, and what are our I don't want to use the word rituals, but I mean, groups have rituals, just like every other, you know, as you move up that ladder of size and scope, has ritual. So those groups dictate the individual behaviors. And when you start to get, I guess, out of line, so to speak, if you start to deviate from those normal behaviors, there are mechanisms in place that kind of help reel you back in.
For better or for worse. Yeah. No, I think one of the ways to think about this, first of all, because people are wondering, like, what does groups have to do with my personal journey to weight loss? A lot, right? Because one of the things that groups do is they define what is normal, right? So oftentimes, like say, I have a patient that comes in and I'll ask them, well, how much do you eat? Because we're trying to get an inventory of the volume of food. And they usually say something like, well, I eat no different than everybody around me. which again, we're in Mississippi.
Usually true.
Right? And so that's a problem because everybody around you, if everybody around you is getting 2 or 3 plates at the buffet, to you, normal now is 2 or 3. And so it's not uncommon that everybody is looking the same size or in the family. I mean, when it comes to family history, what we realize is it's not so much maybe genetics for a lot of people. It's because everyone in the family is eating the same thing or moving the same amount or having the same value system. So they might value going to bed earlier or things like that. And this all plays a big role in your own personal weight loss journey.
Yeah, genetics has a bit of a role there, but the family history is not just your genetics.
Correct.
And so when you say it runs in your family, that does not mean that your DNA has it hard-coded that you're going to be obese. But the normal behaviors and kind of cultural norms that your family follows, whether that be, like you said, your going to sleep preferences, your how are you eating, what are you drinking, do you exercise regularly, do you prioritize, eating dinner together as a family?
Yeah.
Like those types of things all matter, and they all play a role in whether or not you're going to be overweight or obese. And it's kind of the reason that the what is the term? It's designing a diet around your genetic code, your DNA.
Yeah.
I forget the name. Nutritional genomics is what it is. And so this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I'll reel it back in. I promise. They decoded through the Human Genome Project. They've identified all the different alleles and pairs and all these different things, and they identified a whole bunch of different ones that are associated with being overweight or obese. And so they were like, okay, well, these particular genes, if you express them, mean you're predisposed to overweight and obesity. But designing a diet to either maximize or minimize the expression of those particular genes has zero impact on a person's weight status, because we aren't in a vacuum with our DNA. We live in a world with other people and other temptations and desires and cultural practices and foods. And so those things contribute to it significantly more than your DNA does. So just because you have a genetic predisposition does not mean that it's set in stone.
Right.
Much in the same way that your ability to delay gratification when you're 5 does not dictate if you're going to be a success or a failure in any other aspect of your life when you're 35. So
yeah, well, and again, as we were moving on this, I actually want to go back to kind of what you said before, how the group, if you deviate too far from the group will pull you back in.
It's like a gravitational pull.
Yeah. And again, back in the day, this is what kept us alive, right? So we survived in numbers. And so the better the group, the better chance of survival. But let's say your group is very used to eating fried foods, and you, for some reason, it's like, you know what, I want to try to eat healthier. I'm going to start eating more baked or grilled food. The group will be like, why are you doing this? Why, you're the odd person out, right? If everybody goes to Mama Hamil's and you're the one that doesn't get, you just get whatever, a salad or vegetable, you're the odd man out. And after a while, you don't want to be the odd man out. So you'll start conforming back to the group.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. It's this fear of social alienation. We're very, very social creatures. And in a lot of cases, we actually fear being removed or cut off from community more so than whatever negative ramifications or consequences are associated with unhealthy, quote unquote behaviors.
Correct.
And so if we're continuing to eat, a horrible diet, and we're having horrible sleep practices, and we're not exercising, and those are the cultural norms, we know that behaviors like that repeatedly over a long period of time lead to poor health in like almost all cases. We know that, but a lot of times if the group does not agree to kind of move in that direction, we would we would prefer to stay with the group and avoid that isolation than put ourselves out there and risk isolation for the sake of longer life, healthier life, whatever. So it's a weird thing. It's hard to overcome too, because it's like really deep.
Right. Because again, this even we're going to have some real talk on this episode. But again, this is one of those that even extends beyond education, right? Like you think you can outsmart this. You can't. I'll give you an example because we were talking about this today. Lately, all these studies are coming out showing that Wegovy and Ozempic, they lower heart attack risk, they lower sleep apnea. They have all these miracles, and people are just like shocked. But we know that obesity causes all these problems already. This is not like rocket science.
There's really good data that correlates all of these things.
Yeah. So exactly, like Wegovy only causes weight loss. How did it fix sleep apnea? Because obesity really affects obstructive sleep apnea. All right. So this is not something that's new. And so you kind of go back and like, well, how did it become where this is a shocking thing? It's because the group in medicine started shifting more toward you can't address this. Because if you address this, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, right? And so if you're the doctor that tries to address this, you actually get shamed and alienated, at which point you start either get in line or, I guess, risk losing your membership in the group.
Yeah, and I was actually this was not a conversation that you and I were having today, but I had this conversation today too, and I wonder how much of it is just, we're going to get real, but right. I wonder how much of that is kind of throwing your hands up and saying that people are more likely to just take the pill than to put in, whatever work is necessary to get the weight off to address the underlying issue rather than treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to unpack there. And I don't even want to get into that here, but it's just a question of, is it, is there some sort of incentive there, or is it just throwing the hands up because it's better to get the blood pressure, for instance, right. It's better to get it down because it's dangerous to have it high. And so, obviously in the short term, getting it down is a priority. So if you have to do a pill, great, right. Get that down, but then work on the underlying problem. Correct. But a lot of times people don't go into that because, like you said, maybe sparing feelings or, and just know that for most circumstances, people are probably not going to opt to do those changes.
Right.
Which is kind of a frustrating thing for us.
Yeah. Absolutely. But again, I think when you're, just introing this or talking about this episode already, I think people are starting to realize how powerful the people around you or the group is to your own behavior.
Yeah.
Which then moves on to like, well, if you want to change your behavior.
Well, hang on, because I want to touch on that, how important the group is to your behavior and your choices, even when you know better. Okay. So I have a study that I wanted to talk about. Perfect. And I've been waiting to talk about this study for a long time. But this is the episode where we talk about it. And it's, when you said it's really hard, even when it's hard to overcome those kind of gravitational pulls towards the group, right? So there was a study where they took these cards, right? And they had drawings on the cards, like pictures, right? And it was like two different cards. And one-on-one, they'd hold up one card and have a line on it. And then they'd hold up a few other cards and or they'd have another card that had 3 lines on it. And one of the lines was longer, one of the lines was the right size, one of the lines was shorter. So kind of a Goldilocks scenario. And you were asked to identify which line on the 3-line card matched up with your 1-line card, right?
Okay.
Pretty easy.
Yeah.
There was one right answer. So if your line was 3 inches, you would say, well, the 3-inch long line. And when you did that with a person by themselves, they were right 100% of the time, meaning that we're pretty good at looking at a group of lines and saying this one and this one are the same length.
Right.
Now, there are some cognitive illusions that involve lines where they look different, but they are the same. But in this instance, those were not at play. It was literally just, here are your choices, pick one.
Yeah.
We're really good at that. When you add another person, right? So one person is the subject. They're not in on it. Add a person that's in on it into the room and tell them they're instructed to choose the wrong option.
Yeah.
When you do that, people are still pretty good at picking the right answer because they just assume that person's stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The more people you put in the room to choose the incorrect answer, the more, and it's like linear, the more likely you are to choose the wrong answer, even when you know it's incorrect, because you are letting the group kind of dictate what the reality is, and you are just going to go with that, even if it seems off to you. You're going to know that there's something wrong there, but you're way more likely to pick the wrong answer as you increase the group size.
Wow.
So it's a weird thing.
Yeah, definitely got a mob mentality type of thing, right? So usually, if you look at the mob, running through, it's only a few that are truly like passionate, but somehow they get the whole mob stirred up, and everybody. And at the end, when you interview people, like, why'd you do that? Half of them, I was just there, and I just got swept along. Yeah,
man, I think I heard this. It only takes about 8 to 10% of an entire group to start shifting culture if they're the loudest people in the room. Like it's wild.
Yeah.
But I have a couple other statistics I wanted to pull out, and it's another example of how the behaviors of those around you affect you. And so if you have a person that's close to you become overweight or obese, your likelihood of also becoming overweight or obese goes up significantly. And so if it's a friend, like just say you have a friend who becomes overweight or obese, you're 57% more likely to become obese as well.
Wow.
If it's a friend of the same sex, it's a 71% increased likelihood of you also becoming obese. If it's a very close friend, somebody that you feel comfortable being vulnerable around and sharing things with, and you guys, you're super close, 171% increased likelihood of becoming obese if they become obese as well.
Wow.
Siblings increase your likelihood by 40%. And it's a little bit higher if it's a same-sex sibling, like if you're the younger brother and older brother, a little bit higher than that. And spouses, if your spouse gets overweight or obese, you have a 30% increased chance of also becoming overweight or obese. So it does affect you. You tend to adopt the behaviors and the mentalities and all of that of the people closest to you. And so if the people close to you begin to adopt unhealthy behaviors and start gaining weight, you are significantly more likely to also start adopting those behaviors and becoming overweight.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like high school all over again.
It
What I
is.
mean? Like
It is.
your parents always say, "Hey, don't go hanging out with the kids that smoke all the time, because if you do, you'll start smoking." It's kind of like that same concept. Again, what we're talking about here is something deep, right? Something beyond just I've gotten 3 PhDs. Clearly, I'm out of that. It affects what you see, it affects what you hear, and again, it's what's quote unquote normal around you now. And if that's normal, then you'll just kind of flow along.
Well, that reminds me of the G.I. Joe fallacy that we talked about in the episode where we did cognitive biases. And it's the assumption that because you're aware of the cognitive bias that you are capable of overcoming it.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Not at all, yeah.
Like unless you're actively paying attention to it, you're going to fall for it almost every time. That's just the way that the brain works by default.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, see, now that, we've explained this to you guys and people have kind of paid attention, we're not telling you to abandon all your friends that have unhealthy habits or stuff like that. But this is sometimes a time where you might want to have a close look at who's around you. Because if you are active, like, and again, I mean, this is a side note. This is why CrossFit, Burn Boot Camp, all these places are so popular. You can get just as buff without doing CrossFit if you're just in traditional weightlifting. But CrossFit develops this culture where everyone is trying to be healthy, right?
Yes.
Sometimes to a fault. And for you, if you're with them constantly, it becomes easier for you also to start adopting those habits. And again, this is still part of this strategy of trying to figure out how to get healthier, how to lose weight. Your surroundings matter.
Yeah. And I took some notes on what we can do.
Yes.
And so the first place to start is obviously in your group, right? You need to have conversations with the people around you, and let them know what your goals are and what your intentions are and why they're important to you, and also what that might mean as far as your participation in certain aspects of the group's activities, right? Like we mentioned earlier. I don't think we mentioned it. You gave some examples, but I had a few more. But like if your friend group at work goes out for drinks every day after work, and you're trying to quit drinking, like that's probably not a place you want to find yourself.
Right.
And so you need to communicate with them like, hey, I'm trying to quit drinking. So I'm going to participate in all the other activities, but I'm not going to be going to the bar with you guys after work anymore.
Right.
But, and they need to be accepting of that. And so, communicate with them, let them know why it's important, because people that that care, like true friends, people that really care, want to see you do what's best for you.
Right.
And they're going to support that. And if they don't, then you can create your own group or find a new group or join a group that has other people with like minds, people that are all pursuing the same types of goals that you are. And this is kind of where the CrossFit fits in. Like if your friend group is just not into wanting to get into exercise, then you need to find another group of friends that do. Right. Not that you have to abandon your prior group of friends, but finding people that come together with that shared purpose or that shared kind of goal really helps to drive everybody forward, because it's that group pursuit of higher purpose.
Yeah.
Or maybe not higher, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Aspiration, aspiring to self-improvement or a higher version of yourself, at least, you know. Thoughts on that?
Well, no, I think, didn't you tell me a quote yesterday, something about the lines like, you know, if you make boundaries.
I was going to get there.
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to close with that.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
You just drop the mic after that.
Okay. Well, then you'll save that for the land. But no, I mean, I think this is, if you want to be successful in this health journey, this weight loss journey, and you've tried 10 times and you failed all 10 times, there's a time to kind of reevaluate, you know, and maybe it's my delayed gratification, maybe usually it's a combination of all of them, but the friend group is just as big of an area to evaluate. So again, we're talking real talk here. Sometimes the friends that you're with are destructive for your health, and you might just have to realize that I either need to address this with them, let them know like, hey, I'm trying to get healthier. I'm a diabetic now, you know, I'm trying to do something different. And most friends, like I said, the true ones want you to succeed. And so they might stop inviting you for drinks, and that's great because they're trying to help you do what you want. You know, they might not constantly push you to eat dessert after, you know, because they want you to succeed. And again, that's a sign of a good friend. And if they're not willing to do any of that, then we might have to reevaluate who your friend group is.
Yeah. And going back to joining another group where people are all kind of aspiring to the same thing, another benefit of that is when you see other people that are on the same level as you succeed, it inspires you and motivates you to succeed yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
On top of that, when you see other people struggling and you're in a position to support them by offering some advice, there's this weird thing that happens when you are the coach in the situation. So when you coach somebody else, like if you're in your group and you're mutually helping people, you see somebody having a struggle that you yourself are struggling with, but offering them advice for that problem is offering yourself advice for that problem while removing the problem from yourself and getting yourself out of your head. Right?
I like it.
Because when you're trying to figure it out on your own, it's hard to get it out of your head and think about it objectively because there's so much subjectivity, applied to it.
Right.
But when you're communicating advice for someone else, all of that's gone. You can answer it objectively and rationally. And then you can hear that and say, oh, well, why don't I do this?
Yeah.
Which is another reason why that's helpful, because it acts as a source of accountability. Because if you give somebody good advice and then you don't also follow it, that kind of makes you a hypocrite.
Right.
And so nobody's going to call you on that except yourself. But I mean, it's a pretty good thing. Like you will probably not want to feel like a hypocrite. And you'll say, well, I should do these if I'm, telling everybody. What is it? Never do anything you wouldn't tell, or never tell anybody to do anything you wouldn't do yourself.
Absolutely.
Like that leadership style.
Yeah.
It definitely is a thing. So, acting as a source of accountability and support, and then getting that support back from other people, holding each other accountable, lifting each other up when you fall, celebrating with each other when you win and get that PR. That's what CrossFit excels at.
Correct.
And I'm not selling CrossFit. I'm not into CrossFit.
Me neither.
I've been considering incorporating like a day of it every now and then, but that intensity of lifting has not historically been what I gravitate towards. But I cannot oversell the importance of the community aspect and the cultural aspect that CrossFit tends to drive.
Right.
It's just so expensive.
Yeah, exactly. And as a physician looking at it, I'm like, that's a lot of risk for injury. But you're right. What they do and excel at is you'll have people with all different fitness levels in there doing different levels of lifting. And the reason they're all together is because they've really bonded into that group, right? And so accountability, I think everybody realizes accountability is huge. A lot of patients that have tried to lose weight that keep gaining it back, they realize if they're starting a walking habit or an exercise habit, it's so much easier to do it with a friend. A lot of times the reason they stop is because, well, my friend got pregnant and they stopped walking, so I stopped. And
I cannot tell you how many times I've heard something along those lines.
Yeah. So again, doing it by yourself is hard. Very few people have that self-discipline to just discipline themselves and go. And most people, even in that, they have apps, they have something to help track them. And so having another human being, whether it's your spouse or your sibling or a really good friend, that will make your chance of success significantly better than trying to go along on your own.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of it. I don't really have a lot more to go on there.
Perfect.
I guess we can summarize, your group, your cultural circle, the people around you. Like I said, you're the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with, and the group dictates the normal behaviors. You're going to go along with those normal behaviors, whether you choose to or whether you know that they're incorrect or not. You're going to tend to gravitate towards that because that's how we're built. And you need to, normalize the behaviors that you're trying to pursue if they're healthy, and, talk to your group, make sure that they accept that, support that. And if not, you need to create the space for that yourself, or seek one out.
Yep.
And the quote that I wanted to leave us with is, it's about setting those boundaries with those that are around you. So, it's just stuck to me. The only people that are going to be upset about you setting boundaries are the ones that are benefiting from you having none.
Mic drop.
And that was just dang. So that speaks to true friends will always support you and never discourage you from pursuing a better version of you. Because they want to see that better version too.
Exactly.
And that's where I'll leave it.
I like it. Well, this concludes this episode.
Yeah.
We are chugging along near the end. So
yeah, we only have a few episodes left, and I think we're going to try to squeeze in a bonus episode where I'm not the one running the show on that one. We'll try to bring a special guest on and do that. So I don't know if that'll be the next one or the next one or the next one, but we're going to do it. I promise.
Sounds good.
So we'll catch you all next time. Leave us some feedback if you want. Ask us some questions, and we'll talk to you in a week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.